folks, Jack Wilkie here with the final Church Reset read-through. It has been a little while. I did not intend to go this long without finishing up the book. In fact, we finished, the last one was half of a chapter, and we left the last half of it for this episode. Life gets busy, things happen, but I'm here to round out this series and look forward to the next one. One of the things I've been busy with is writing another book. It's entitled You Are Saved, The Christian's Assurance, and so I'm really excited about that one. I'm going to start putting out chapters here in the next few weeks, Lord willing, to my site, jackwilkie.co, and so be sure you're subscribed there to get the latest on those. And as always, be sure you're subscribed to the Church Reset podcast feed, where you might be already subscribed and listening to this. If not, if you're catching it on YouTube or on Substack, be sure to subscribe to that podcast feed where you'll get all the latest. So let's go ahead and get into this final chapter of Church Reset, and then I'll kind of have some closing thoughts. And one of the things I've been busy with is looking at some of the other things that are out there now, some popular movements, and there's parallels to what I wrote in this book, Church Reset, in a lot of ways. But I think some things that are being missed, some lessons I've learned that I think can help us understand where to go from here after we get these concepts of being a more family-like church and kind of how to get there. So let's finish up with the last half of the conclusion of Church Reset, and we'll conclude with some final thoughts. Picking up with a hope for something better. On the other hand, the realization that perfection won't be reached here in this life doesn't mean we can't hope for and work toward a more biblical version of church. There are plenty of reasons to be excited about what could be as we let God's Word lead. I believe many of the biggest issues facing the church in recent years are greatly mitigated by following God's plan. A few examples. Youth unfaithfulness. I would argue the biggest issue facing the church today is the youth dropout rate. We are losing young people by the thousands and have been for years. This issue often gets downplayed or disputed by those who live in cities near bigger congregations and don't see a problem. Nearly every church they see has a youth group, and the camps and conferences always have plenty of young people. However, there are plenty of smaller, more rural churches with essentially no youth presence whatsoever. Outside of those concentrated areas, you will find plenty of congregations without anybody under 20 years old. Sometimes there will be young children, but they're being toted to worship by their grandparents, as the parents and the rest of the 20 to 40-year-olds are nowhere to be found. That's not only what the eye test tells us, but what the researchers have also long confirmed. The studies have varied greatly in their findings, but nearly all of them have reported that over half of those who grow up in a Christian home will walk away from the faith. The reasons given always vary, but some of the more common ones are that the young people never developed a faith of their own, they were never taught to defend what they believe, and they never developed intergenerational relationships. In a system where young people are baptized and stashed away for years in a junior varsity version of church, where they are largely separate from the rest of their Christian family, it's no wonder that each of these leading factors are in play. For me, despite growing up as a regular attendee of a faithful congregation, after baptism there was little expected of me outside of showing up to classes and events or going to camps. Occasionally I was asked to say a prayer during Sunday night worship or pass out communion trays on Sunday morning. Outside of our respective parents, nobody was really discipling me or my peers individually. There was simply a one-size-fits-all program to attend until graduation. On the other hand, a system in which young people find mentorship and a Jesus-focused plan for their spiritual growth is an answer to these shortcomings. With people who will teach them to study, teach them to pray, answer their questions, and make them part of the family, they have a far better chance of survival than when they are told to come to classes and devos in hopes that the message will stick. Intergenerational relationships, biblical convictions, and opportunities for service give young people the deep roots they need to stay faithful as they grow into adulthood. Youth faithfulness has been one of my big points of emphasis, really even back before. When I was in college, just looking around at my high school classmates and people I knew going, man, this is not good. And of course, the statistics have long been there, as I said, and it just is really discouraging, as I've been in small churches where the older people are there, their grandkids are there, well, then their grandkids grow up, and I've got enough data now to know many of them are not going to church, unfortunately, and it just carries on, and it's like, well, who's going to be left? If we can't keep our own, as Dr. Brad Harrod puts it in one of his lessons, we do all this evangelism and outreach and vacation Bible school and gospel meetings and all this stuff to get people, fill the bucket of church attendance, and we've got holes in the bottom where our own people are falling out. We've got to do something about that. And again, this divided, age-segregated version of church, this junior varsity, go over there to the kids' church, the youth group church, and hang out with only your own peer group, that's not a family. Life doesn't work that way. When you go into the workplace, when you go into anything outside of school and the youth group, you've got to interact with all kinds of people, and you are better for it. Those intergenerational relationships are one of the key factors in people staying faithful. And so connecting them and having them know people and really share their struggles and have kind of those mentorship kind of relationships, those spiritual aunts and uncles, spiritual grandparents, things like that, that goes a long way. That is a huge factor in keeping people faithful. And so that's one of the things I love about the idea of maximizing what we are as a church is it handles all of these things. It's not that we've got to think about how do we work on youth faithfulness? How do we work on this? How do we work on that? It all goes together if we do this right, if we are being the church. And so, yeah, it's about getting the focus in the right place. All right, continuing, women's roles. One of the most prominent issues of the 21st century has been and will continue to be the role of women in the church. Many are pushing for full participation in leadership and worship. Others, of course, disagree, while still others are advocating some kind of compromise. While this book is not meant to provide an in-depth discussion of that issue, there is reason to believe a more biblical church would alleviate some of the challenges levied against male-led churches. When church is 90% or so focused on what happens in the building on Sunday, and women aren't allowed to participate there, then it's not unfair to say that women are second-class citizens of sorts. If, on the other hand, the Sunday gathering is just one part, an important part, but still one of many, of what the church does, we can meaningfully say women are allowed to do nearly everything but that. Spiritually minded, older Christian women are commanded to share their wisdom with younger Christian women, Titus 2:4, and the younger women would be wise to seek them out. No, it's not a sermon, but the impacts of discipling a woman and thereby impacting her husband, children, grandchildren, and everyone with whom she comes into contact can be far greater. They might not occupy the pulpit, but their teaching is still desperately needed. The Bible shows the power of praying, worshiping women with the examples of Miriam, Hannah, and Anna, along with Mary's Magnificat. They might not be authorized to lead worship, but their worship and prayer matters. The women who followed and ministered to Jesus throughout the Gospels played a vital role in his ministry, despite the fact that they weren't chosen in the 12. God's work can be wonderfully administered by faithful women in a number of ways that don't have to include the Sunday gathering. You probably have a Christian woman from your life coming to mind who has joyfully embraced this role and impacted a congregation by her faithfulness. Though such women might not have a title, they are certainly needed servants of the church. In the age of Google searches and Facebook groups, it's easy for all of us to look to internet strangers for advice and spiritual encouragement, and young women are no exception. But what they need more than anything is to have women in their own congregations who care for them and are intentional about being in their lives. Women might not be able to be elders, but they can still guide and care for souls. Therefore, it's vitally important that we create a culture that goes beyond Sundays and beyond the building. So, we've talked about this some on Think Deeper, but we created the Ladies' Day and we created the Ladies' Bible, all these things to let women kind of simulate the preaching role. And it's like the Bible explains the older women teaching the younger to love their husbands and their children and to be keepers at home and those things that you see in Titus 2 and some of the instructions in 1 Timothy 5 and things like that and Proverbs 31. And it's not we need to have like a simulated Sunday worship that they can do their own version of it. It's life teaching. It's relational teaching. It's coming over and sitting with her and whatever the case may be. And I see a lot of stuff from younger women saying, I have reached out, I can't get that from people. I see stuff from older women saying, man, I've tried to offer advice and falls on deaf ears. They don't want to hear me. They want to go to the Facebook group. They want to go to Instagram experts, whatever the case may be, for their advice, their mentorship, or whatever. It's gonna take some work because we haven't really seen it. We've got a lot of that hasn't been done, and so there's gonna take some patience, especially from the older end. If you're one of those women who has raised a Christian family and had a successful Christian marriage for so many years, that's valuable information. People might not take you up on it the first time. You also might have to realize you need some practice at it. If you haven't mentored somebody, if you haven't done it just offering the first time and getting shut down, maybe figuring out how to approach it, maybe figuring out how to get a foot in the door, things like that. But, I mean, this is one of these, I don't know, it kind of drives me crazy when we're talking about all these things that haven't been done for so long or have fallen through the cracks or whatever. And I've been guilty of the same thing, but I tried it once, it didn't work. I guess we're just not going to do it. If we think it needs to be done, we need to stick at it until it gets done. And we'll find the people with whom we can do these things. It's a process. We're finding our way. We're learning how to walk again. that takes some falling down. I mean, church has become so dumbed down, so minimalistic, so program oriented, so Sunday oriented, so sermon oriented, all these things we've talked about all the way through this book. It's going to take some time to get our legs back under us. That's okay. Just keep at it. And so this idea that, well, women can't do anything in the church. They can. It might not be the thing you want to do. It might not, there's this idea, there's just like this glamour to the pulpit. Okay. I mean, there's not. If we were better at glorifying these kinds of things and equipping people for these kinds of things, I don't think we would have this problem. All right, continuing on. Christianity's outward image. It's no stretch to say that Christianity is growing increasingly unpopular in our culture, but there are two sides to that coin. In one sense, that's not a strike against us. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The world is always going to have a problem with Jesus and his people, John 15:18-19. The gospel is offensive because it tells people their self-applied standard of righteousness is invalid. Anybody who upholds this truth by insisting that Jesus is Lord will not receive the culture's approval. In another sense, though, we haven't helped ourselves. Because the gospel is offensive enough on its own, we have to be extremely cautious not to add offense to it. Unfortunately, for multiple generations, Christianity has become commonly seen as a political movement or a holier-than-thou group of people in an ivory tower church building. We say the church is the people rather than the building, but to most unchurched outsiders, they identify different churches by location. To those who have a degree of biblical literacy, they identify different churches by each one's defined doctrinal characteristics, such as how a church worships. Sadly, they don't know us as their neighbors who love them and who are an image of Christ-likeness in their lives. We can't change everyone's minds all at once, but by getting outside of our buildings and working on showing people the love of Christ by building relationships with them, we can help change their perception of us. We'll pause right there on that one. I think there are, some things that, again, the part where they're not going to like us, and or at least just knowing us for being different, culturally, we should be very different. You kind of think about the Mennonites or Amish if you live around a community like that, but even the Muslims or even the Mormons, I've brought this up in this series. Culturally, they're different. They stand out. Christians should stand out for a number of things. It should be our love. It should be our fellowship. It should be our unity and all of those kinds of things, but it also should be that we're very different people. Our marriages are different. Our children are different. Our work ethic is different. Our everything, our integrity is different. All of those things should be true, and we should be cultivating those. We should be cultivating a counterculture, and there's some of those things they're going to like, some of those things they're not going to like, but it's going to be strangely different. It's going to be strangely bright in that sense that some people are going to be attracted to it, and some people are going to want to hide their eyes from it. And that's not our problem, but we do need to have that difference, and this is a way to do that. That we're not just known as the people that meet over there, but there's something to who we are as a group. Continuing, minister burnout. Minister burnout is a very real, very dangerous side effect of a church model in which the preacher bears the responsibility for the success or failure of a business. With customers, members, always tugging at him to get their way, and with managers, elders, determining whether his approval rating is high enough to keep him around, it's no wonder so many ministers struggle with depression and anxiety. When so many view their minister as an employee of an organization they attend, it's no wonder he and his family are often so lonely. This is yet another problem that is improved when the preacher gets to be just one part of a functioning church body rather than the key piece who is tasked with driving the lion's share of the church's work. Rather than trying to appease countless people who remain in spiritual infancy and require constant attention, the minister should have people who can share in the work and who can in turn care for him as well. Every preacher knows the value of the Christians who show love and consideration for the minister and his family. In the biblical system where people are being brought to maturity, those encouraging, life-giving people aren't quite as few and far between. You think about the guys, lifting up Moses' arms. You need that kind of thing, but you need leadership in a church that is on board enough with a preacher to really have vision, to really say, we're going to do right by God. We're not trying to keep everybody happy. It's not about the numbers on the board. We don't want to decline greatly, but as I made the point a few chapters ago, Jesus would have been fired for losing the 5,000 in John 6. Started with 5,000. After his resurrection, there's 140, 120, whatever it was in the upper room. He would have been fired as a minister. And like the toll that takes if you're worried about numbers, if you're worried about keeping everybody happy, all of those things, that's no good. And so knowing who's mad at you, knowing who's not going to be there this week, knowing the squeaky wheel, the things like that, there are better ways to handle that, and it is rethinking this consumer provider role and the equipper facilitator role, but also that he's got people on board with him, helping him equip other people and picking up some of that slack, and that he's getting them to do the work. I mean, that's what we're explicitly told in Ephesians 4 and in other places. Continuing with mental health. One of the most widely discussed issues of our day is the crisis of mental health struggles. People all around us struggle with depression, anxiety, and other challenges. In many, if not most cases, if the person next to us in the pew on Sunday is fighting such a battle, we'll never know about it. God's design for the church gives us an opportunity to be on the front lines of helping each other through such troubles, though. This is not to downplay the importance of therapy and medicines where needed, but a church family that loves like Jesus and remains a constant in each other's lives is one of the best tools a person can have in their fight for good mental health. We all need to be loved despite our shortcomings, and a church family with which we can be open and share our struggles gives us that. We all need an identity, and an identity grounded in the cross is the best identity a person can have. We all need purpose to keep us going, and a church family that depends on what every joint supplies gives us that. The person in the midst of the struggles gets the chance to contribute to others rather than feeling like they're somebody's pet project. Such love, belonging, and purpose can go a long way toward helping each other. It's yet another reason why God's design was so brilliant for fighting the battles presented by a fallen world full of sickness and pain. Pretty straightforward, but yeah, I mean, connection, purpose, the ability to feel like people care about you and want you around, that there's a lot in that in mental health, and the kind of thing that gets you out of bed and gets you thinking, I've got to do something, I've got to hold up my end of the bargain, that matters, and I think that's an important factor. All right, continuing, overlooked groups. It's heartbreaking how many people have a story of struggling to fit in with a church family. Sometimes the demographics line up in such a way to leave people feeling like they don't belong. Singles, those who are divorced, and those who are childless are just a few who sometimes struggle to fit in. There is certainly value in groups that are created for those in such categories, as their shared experiences can create a sense of understanding and belonging they might not find elsewhere. However, separating them from the rest of the group is certainly not the picture the New Testament paints. We are all one in Christ. We share each other's burdens, weeping with those who weep and making them part of the family. Jesus always noticed the downtrodden that the common society had passed over. Jesus' following disciples do the same and refuse to let them stay overlooked or excluded. This is one of those that, like, in our social media world and all these ideas of kind of how to handle each other's feelings, we think about this stuff more, for better and for worse, but something about, okay, a young couple at church is, pregnant and the church wants to give them a baby shower or that kind of thing, but then you've got those that haven't been able to have children, and so what do you do with that? And there is a rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, and we need to, the excited new family should be rejoicing, but also should be weeping with those who weep, and there's a time and a place for all those things, and sometimes it's all one or the other, and we've kind of shifted more toward the watching out for feelings thing, and so you'll see Mother's Day, and it's like, well, mothers, but also all of these other categories in which Mother's Day might be painful, those who have lost a mother, those who haven't been able to be a mother, those who are estranged from their mother, all those things, same thing with Father's Day. We need to get back to the rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep, and bring all these people together. And when we're not doing relationships in the social media sense where we've got to think about, how's this going to be taken, but like, hey, I love you. You know that I'm excited for me and hurting for you, or the other way around. I'm hurting for me, but I'm excited for you. And I've had those experiences in real life where you're kind of told tiptoe around this stuff in person, and then you get around each other and it's like, no, we're family. This is how this happens. We bear each other's burdens in this way, and that's a really neat thing when you have that connection. All right, finally, pornography addiction. Pornography addiction has beset countless spiritual lives, and the problem isn't going to just go away on its own in a time when kids are practically born with a Wi-Fi enabled device in their hands. It's a sin that thrives on shame and secrecy, and we were ill-equipped to handle its transition to the internet. If you need to confess a sin, come forward as we stand and sing does no good to people who are fighting a sin that carries such a strong stigma. By being the church as God designed it, though, we have exactly what we need to defeat this epidemic. Pornography is defeated by strong relationships that offer both love and accountability. Only when we establish the kind of love and trust God wants us to offer each other will there be a climate where people are comfortable confessing their hidden struggles. They need to know those struggles won't be held against them and that they will still be loved even when they fall. The same holds true for any number of other taboo sins. That's such a big one. It's one that, again, if our only outlet for that is come forward as we stand and sing, most people aren't going to confess that. And most people aren't really equipped to hear that. This is not the kind of thing that needs to be confessed to everybody. But again, you've got a close-knit church family. You've got hands-on elders. You've got ministers and people being equipped to do this kind of work. And you're spending the time together. The door is open for that kind of confession, that kind of accountability. That is how a sin, and it's not just pornography. There's a bunch of different sins that could fall into that category, but that may be the most prominent one statistically. That's one that we can address by being the church. All right, finishing up. It's not possible to foresee every challenge that will come our way, but it's important to be realistic in our hopes for the church. If we idolize our picture of the church, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment, and we will likely negatively impact the church. Still, even among the realism, there is great cause for excitement. Jesus planned his church beautifully, and the more closely we follow him, the more blessings we will see. What else can we do but praise him? And then the final discussion questions. What are other questions you have about a shift in church tactics? Leave that to you. What other concerns should be monitored? What is a problem you feel is facing the church? How do you think a relationship-based, mission-minded church structure might help the problem? I think that's a question worth pondering. We talked about these are things I think are big challenges for the church, but there are other ones, and what do you have that might help that? All right, let's finish with the conclusion. We don't go to church, we are the church. The phrase has been around for as long as I can remember, but it's rarely been more than just a vague saying that sounds nice but lacks any teeth. We can all agree the statement is true, but that still leaves us to decide what it means in practical terms. That's why it's so exciting to see a growing movement aimed at defining what it means to be the church, and then acting on that definition. It's my prayer that this book is another step in that direction for each reader. Change is hard to come by, though. Many struggle with great discomfort at the very thought of change, resisting it at every turn. At some point, most Christians have likely heard the phrase, "We've always done it that way," used as a reason to not rethink methods of the past. Many are also protective of their traditions because the longer a tradition has been in place, the easier it is to think of it as a scriptural necessity. But God does not have to be hindered by our stubbornness. Sometimes when we're shaken out of our comfort zones, he takes the opportunity to do some of his best work. I do not presume to speak for God, but that may very well be what he's doing in real time as I write this conclusion. I began writing Church Reset around September 2019. When I began, plenty of rethinking and changing were taking place, but nobody could have predicted what was going to happen in our world in the months to come. As words and phrases like coronavirus, COVID-19, social distancing, and abundance of caution entered our vocabulary, church life got turned on its head. Though I have no way of knowing what the future holds on the other side of the quarantine, I have hope that God will bring wonderful changes to his church through this time. The situation has already been a catalyst for readjusting our focus on what is really important. As we've lost access to our buildings, we've realized that church never was the building. As we've watched worship services online, we've figured out just how hollow that experience can be without each other's presence. As our church events have been canceled and plans have been changed, we've had a chance to see what the real work of the church, or that the real work of the church is found in the way we connect with each other and those around us. All of this represents an opportunity to begin applying the principles we know to be true. What forms that will take, I don't know, but I can't wait to see the ideas brought forth by those striving to restore God's plan for the church. Plenty of examples already existed before the pandemic, and more will surely come as we sort out that which must be included from that which does not serve the purpose of pointing people to Jesus and bringing us closer together. For some congregations, it has meant rearranging the auditorium to have everyone facing each other like a family does. For others, it has meant giving up the building entirely. For some, it has meant rearranging their Sunday schedule to allow for more fellowship and to truly treat it like a family reunion. For others, it has meant rethinking the method of distributing the Lord's Supper to highlight its importance as a true communion meal of remembrance to be shared together rather than as individuals. For some, it has meant removing lines of separation in church gatherings that have kept different ages and demographics apart. For others, it has meant rethinking the budget to cut down on overhead as much as possible in order to maximize their ability to reach the lost and help the poor. Most important of all, many have joined in the journey of making disciples, whether by gathering a group of a few or by taking on one disciple at a time. There are all kinds of things we can do to change and grow in our methods while staying within scriptural bounds. What matters is that we stay true to the purposes for which we exist as the church in the first place. Before I finish, it's really interesting to read 5 years on, and just some of that hope, and it was a bad time, obviously, with everything that was going on in 2020. But then you look back, and some people kind of rethought the Sunday, especially the Sunday evening service has been changed in a lot of places. Some have emphasized more fellowship. Some churches have really took the opportunity for change. I think generally everything kind of settled back into what we do, our normal schedules, our yearly calendar, things like that, and that's okay to a degree. I wish there had been a little bit more rethinking, and I think there's still opportunity to do that. It was just felt like a, Lord willing, once in a lifetime opportunity to start fresh. But in another sense, lessons we're learning, and again, the importance of fellowship once it was taken away is something we should not soon forget. It's easy already 5 years to look back and be like, man, did that really happen? Was it really that bad? Were we really that isolated? We really were. And to keep that in mind and say, yeah, getting back to this, they're there if I need them kind of thing. No, take the time we have, clear our schedule a little bit for each other, things like that. All right, end of the book. As I've said repeatedly, this book has not been written as a step-by-step guide. I'm not looking to hold myself up as any kind of example because I'm just another person on the same journey. All I set out to do in this book was to study the principles the Bible gives us for the church and see how those principles answer our problem of rampant consumerism in the modern American church. The different applications are up to you. It was obvious from the outset of my study that we needed to get away from building-oriented, schedule-oriented Christianity. It was also obvious that the choose-your-own-adventure Christianity of our individualist society was not what God ever intended. The question that remained was, how will things change? How can we drop those obviously incorrect versions of Christianity in favor of a mission-minded, family-oriented version of church? The answer, of course, is Jesus. Every December, we hear from those clamoring to keep Christ in Christmas. Maybe it's time we start campaigning instead to keep Christ in Christianity. Where we have drifted from our purpose, it has been because we have attempted to put something other than Jesus at the center of it all. The only path back is to once again acknowledge Him as the King of everything and center everything we do on Him. What makes Christianity different from every other religion is that it has Jesus and the others do not. Christianity's head was and is sinless. He has power over sickness, demons, nature, and even death. He is God. That's the principle I hope has been the foundational takeaway for each reader. We have to base everything we do on the beauty and supremacy of Christ. His love, His blood, His headship, His promises, and everything else about Him are where we find the power of Christianity. May we as His church look to Him, drop everything that hinders us, and run toward Him with all our might. Hebrews 12:1 and 2, and bring as many with us on the journey as we can. Only then will we see just how much more church can be. All right, well, that rounds out the book. Just some closing thoughts. The follow-up book has been on the back burner. I've been asked about it for a couple of years now. When are you going to write the follow-up? Because I've learned a lot in the time since, and it's really interesting right now. There's a guy, super popular, John Mark Comer. I might write on some of his stuff here soon, Practicing the Way. And there's a lot of overlap. In fact, I was listening to one of his talks in their whole The Way curriculum on the church family. And I mean, point for point, I know he's not familiar with my work, but we had the same points. We had a lot of the same ideas. But I can see now, 5 years removed, where that hits a dead end. Where, we should be a closer church family. Well, why aren't we? We don't share a culture. We don't think alike. We don't have the same worldview. And so I was, kind of jokingly, but somewhat seriously thinking, grab this book back here, if you're watching the video, I kind of already wrote the follow-up to Church Reset, and it's not what anybody thought. It's this book, Transform Faith, that I did with Dr. Brad Harrub. And really, it's just a collection of the articles we've written over the years about seeing the world from the biblical view. Masculinity, femininity, marriage, parenting, cultural issues like LGBT things like that, social media, politics, culture, things like that. That's at the heart of, we want to be a closer church family. You're going to have those things. You're going to have to get there. And so I've had a lot of people who loved Church Reset really not follow along with the more recent stuff I've put out, because that's where you start getting specific. Everybody loves the idea of a close-knit church family. But when you start saying, hey, super, worldly-minded family and a family that's trying to get away from that, they can't do Church Reset together. A couple that is very egalitarian and feminist in their marriage, and a couple that is male headship in their marriage and their parenting and their family style, it's going to be hard to do the Church Reset. We're not sharing our goals. We're not sharing our direction. Most importantly, we're not sharing the Lordship of Christ. There's these verses that you read that people like, man, stay away from those. Don't get specific on those. And And so I see this practicing the way stuff, and it all sounds really nice about spiritual formation, and none of it is specific about who you are Monday through Saturday, other than your quiet time with God and doing nice things for people. But as far as your killing the idols in your heart, and those are some of them, if we're all coming to church with our little idols in our back pocket, we're not going to be closer together. And so how do you get there? You start building a church culture where the teaching is specific, where the execution is specific, where the reprove, rebuke, exhort happens to say we're going to get on the same page of acting like Christ, but also in submission to Christ. Obedience. That word has disappeared from Christianity. Obedience, repentance, submission, those kinds of things. Without that, it's just not going to happen. And so there's a lot of people who thought Church Reset was a great book, and now are just think I've gone off the reservation. It's like, look, we're just not going to get there without a shared value set. And so that's why I've turned my attention to more day-to-day cultural life issues instead of ecclesiology of what the church is supposed to be. It's like, it's supposed to be that. You can't get there from here. We've got to build the roadway to get there, and that is through men and women being the men and women God called them to be, and preachers and elders having the ability to say these things and get people moving in this direction. So we have a shared Christian culture from which we have the foundation that we can grow closer together. It just doesn't happen without that. And so that's, as I'm saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek, that Transform Faith is kind of the follow-up book, but there's a sense in which it is. There is a follow-up book outlined. Hopefully, Lord willing, I'll get to writing it someday. I'm trying to practically get there and have a little bit more experiential knowledge to write the next time around, but it's been a fun journey for me. I really appreciate all those who have come along with me on this read-through, but also have read the book and corresponded and read and all the conversations I've had over the years about this topic. We all want a closer church. We're all hoping to work towards it, and it's as I said earlier, it's learning to walk. It's learning things that maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago, things that maybe people knew more intuitively and instinctively, and figuring out how do we get that back. Well, we're going to fall down a few times on the way. We care enough to keep going, and so that's the main pull of what we're trying to do here. So thanks for listening. Again, if you're not subscribed to the Church Reset podcast, please do so, because there will be plenty more to come. And with that, I'm going to sign off for the Church Reset read-through series. Oh, and as always, you can get the book on focuspress.org or on Amazon. Supporting subscribers on my site, jackwilkie.co, get an ebook with your subscription of just $8 a month. So that's probably the cheapest way to get a hold of it if you are interested, is just the jackwilkie.co. But had to give that little plug there at the end. And there's nothing else for me to cover in this one. I'll talk to you guys on the next one.